My name is Abigail, 28 years old, standing frozen at my childhood doorway as snowflakes melted in my hair. The house was dark, no Christmas lights, no welcoming warmth. Just Grandpa Harold sitting alone at our kitchen table, methodically chewing a sandwich. I had flown 2,000 miles for this holiday reunion, but found only emptiness and a chill that had nothing to do with December. When Grandpa saw my face fall, he whispered firmly, "They will regret this." I just smiled. Let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt that sting of family disappointment during the holidays. The weight of my luggage seemed insignificant compared to the heaviness settling in my chest as I stepped inside the dark house. The familiar scent of pine and cinnamon that typically announced Christmas at the Reynolds household was noticeably absent. "Where is everyone, Grandpa?" I asked, setting down my bags and unwinding the scarf from my neck. The heating was barely on, making the interior nearly as cold as the snowy landscape outside. Harold gestured toward the refrigerator with his half-eaten sandwich. "Take a look for yourself, Abby." I crossed the kitchen, my boots leaving wet marks on the linoleum floor. When I pulled open the refrigerator door, the sudden light illuminated a yellow sticky note placed front and center. The handwriting was unmistakably my mother Sandra's hasty scrawl. "Abigail. Used your money for Jason. Watch him for the week. Merry Christmas." My fingers trembled as I plucked the note from the fridge. $3,000. That was how much I had transferred to my parents 2 weeks ago, money I had explicitly sent to prepare for our family Christmas celebration. Money I had scrimped and saved from my marketing assistant salary in New York, working overtime for months in hopes of giving my family the Christmas I always dreamed we could have. "They left yesterday," Harold said, finishing his sandwich. "Your father booked a resort in Hawaii. Premium package. With my money?" My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears. "Unfortunately. Yes. They took your Christmas fund and turned it into their personal vacation." Harold's eyes, so similar to my father's yet filled with a compassion my father rarely displayed, watched me carefully. "Jason is upstairs. Been holed up in his room since they left. My 17-year-old brother was supposed to be under my parents' care, not abandoned during the holidays." The realization that they had left not only me but also Jason and Grandpa Harold behind added another layer to the betrayal. "Did they even tell him they were leaving?" I asked. Harold shook his head. "Left him a similar note. Poor kid came downstairs yesterday morning to find the house empty except for me. I moved in temporarily when your mother called asking if I could check in on Jason occasionally. Had no idea they were planning to dump him entirely." I sank into the chair opposite Harold. The note crumpled in my fist. This wasn't the first time my parents had taken advantage of me, but it was certainly the most blatant. Throughout my childhood, I had been the responsible one. The one who sacrificed, the one who gave. My college fund had mysteriously diminished to pay for home renovations. My first car had been borrowed and totaled by my father with no reimbursement. My time had been volunteered to babysit Jason without being asked. But this was a new low. "I saved for months," I whispered, more to myself than to Harold. "Picked up extra projects. Skipped lunches, canceled my streaming subscriptions. Also, we could have one perfect Christmas together." Harold reached across the table and covered my hand with his weathered one. "I know, sweetie. And what they did was wrong on every level. Taking your money without permission is theft, plain and simple. Even if they're your parents." Footsteps on the stairs announced Jason's arrival. My brother had grown several inches since I last saw him, his lanky frame filling the doorway. But his eyes held a hardness I didn't recognize, a premature cynicism that broke my heart. "So you finally got here," he said, arms crossed defensively across his chest. "Thought maybe you'd bail too." "I would never bail on you, Jason," I replied, standing up. "I had no idea they were going to leave." "Yeah, well, welcome to the club." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the hurt beneath his tough exterior. "They do this all the time now. Just without the fancy Hawaiian vacation part. Usually it has just disappeared into their own lives, leaving me to figure things out." I crossed the room and, despite his initial resistance, pulled him into a hug. After a moment of stiffness, He relaxed against me, suddenly seeming younger than his 17 years. "I am sorry," I whispered into his hair, which smelled of the same shampoo I remembered from my own teenage years in this house. "I had no idea things had gotten this bad." "How could you?" he mumbled against my shoulder. "They put on a great show when you call." When we separated, I saw Harold watching us with a peculiar expression, a mixture of sadness and determination. "You know," he said slowly, "there comes a point when people need to learn that their actions have consequences." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though something in his tone had already sparked a tiny flame of vindication within me. Harold's eyes gleamed with unexpected mischief. "I am suggesting that perhaps it is time your parents understand exactly what they have done. How it feels to be abandoned, to have trust broken, to be treated as an afterthought." "You want to teach them a lesson," Jason said, not a question but a statement tinged with approval. Harold nodded. "A lesson they will not soon forget." That night, as I unpacked in my old bedroom, preserved like a museum to my teenage years, I found myself torn between the hurt child within me who wanted justice and the responsible adult I had fought so hard to become. The $3,000 represented more than money. It was trust. It was respect. It was the belief that my family valued me beyond what I could provide them. As I placed my phone on the nightstand, it buzzed with a text message from my mother. "Hope you arrived safely. House needs some cleaning. Thanks for watching, Jason. Having an amazing time in Maui." Not a word of apology. Not a hint of recognition for what she had done. Just expectations and self-absorption. I stared at the message until my screen went dark, then whispered into the empty room, "Grandpa is right. They will regret this." Morning light filtered through the dusty blinds of my childhood bedroom, creating patterns on the faded floral wallpaper I had once begged to replace. I found Harold and Jason already at the kitchen table, nursing cups of coffee and speaking in hushed tones that immediately ceased when I entered. "Good morning," I said, making my way to the coffee pot that looked like it had seen better days. "Planning world domination without me?" Harold chuckled, the sound warming the otherwise chilly kitchen. "Not world domination. Just a little family realignment." I poured myself coffee in the chipped mug that had somehow survived from my high school days. The faded university logo, a reminder of dreams partially fulfilled. "I am listening." Jason pushed a legal pad toward me as I sat down. At the top, in Harold's precise handwriting, were the words Operation Reality Check. "Grandpa thinks we should teach Mom and Dad what it feels like to be abandoned," Jason explained, his voice caught between excitement and nervousness. "Show them what it is like to have someone disappear on them without warning." The idea stirred something within me, memories cascading through my mind like dominoes. The time I had won the state writing competition in 8th grade, only to find no one in the audience when my name was called. The graduation my parents had missed because a work opportunity came up for my father. The hospital stay after my appendectomy when they had visited only once, for 20 minutes, explaining they had to get back to prepare for Jason's birthday party. Always excuses. Always priorities that somehow never included me. I was always the reliable one, I found myself saying. The one who would understand, who would forgive, who would adjust. Harold nodded. "They took advantage of your good nature, Abigail. Used your sense of responsibility against you. And now they have literally taken your money," Jason added, anger flashing in his eyes. $3,000. Do you know what Dad said when I asked about Christmas plans last week? That money was tight, and we should all be grateful for what we have. Meanwhile, they were booking first-class tickets to Maui. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. My mother's name flashed on the screen. I answered, putting it on speaker. "Abigail, darling." Sandra's voice was overlaid with the unmistakable sounds of waves and distant music. "Did you get settled in? Is the house okay?" "The house is fine, Mom," I replied, fighting to keep my voice neutral. "Though it would have been nice to know you, and Dad would not be here when I arrived." A pause, then a dismissive laugh. "Oh, sweetie, it was such a last-minute opportunity. Robert's colleague offered us his timeshare at an incredible discount. We could not pass it up." Harold's eyebrows rose, and Jason mouthed silently, "Liar." "And my money?" I asked directly. "The money I sent specifically for our family Christmas?" Another pause, longer this time. Well, we will sort all that out when we get back. You know how much we appreciate your help, Abigail. You have always been our rock. And Jason? You left him alone, Mom. He is hardly alone, she countered, voice suddenly defensive. Harold is checking in and now you are there. Jason is 17. Not 7. Besides, you two can bond. When was the last time you spent quality time with your brother? The audacity of her shifting the responsibility onto me made my blood boil. When was the last time you did, Mom? The line went silent except for the cheerful background noises of paradise. Then Sandra's voice, artificially bright, Robert is calling me for breakfast. The buffet here is divine. Talk soon, sweetie. Love you. And she was gone, leaving the three of us staring at my phone. See what I mean? Harold finally said. Not a word of genuine apology or concern. I set my phone down carefully, as if it might shatter under the weight of my anger. So, what exactly are you proposing we do? Harold leaned forward. His former career as an attorney evident in his methodical explanation. A 3-part plan. First, we secure any valuables or sentimental items by moving them to a safe location. Second, we create a scenario that will cause your parents immediate concern upon their return. Third, we deliver the message that will drive home exactly what they have done. You mean like pretend the house was robbed? Jason asked, eyes wide. Not exactly robbed, Harold clarified. More like temporarily reorganized. Nothing illegal. Nothing that causes permanent damage. Just enough to create the same feelings of violation and abandonment they have inflicted on both of you. I bit my lip, considering the implications. And what is the message we are trying to send? That you cannot take people for granted, Harold stated firmly. That relationships require respect and honesty. That actions have consequences. My mind raced with potential outcomes, with fears and doubts. What if this makes things worse? What if they just get angry and never learn anything? Then you will know exactly where you stand. Harold said simply. And you can make decisions about your future relationship with them based on that knowledge. Jason looked at me pleadingly. Abby, they need to understand what they are doing to us. To you. They will never change otherwise. I thought about the text from my mother, so casually dismissive of the theft of my money and time. I thought about the dark, cold house that had greeted me instead of the warm family Christmas I had dreamed of. Okay, I finally said. What exactly do we need to do? Harold smiled. A hint of the mischievous grandfather I remembered from childhood emerging through his serious demeanor. First, I need you to call your boss and request a few more days off. Then we start Operation Reality Check. I excused myself to make the call, stepping onto the back porch where my breath formed clouds in the cold air. Lawrence answered on the third ring. Abigail. How is the family Christmas going? He asked. I laughed humorlessly. That is actually why I am calling. There has been a family situation. I need to extend my leave by 3 days. I have plenty of vacation time saved up. Lawrence paused. Everything okay? You sound stressed. Just family drama, I replied. Watching a cardinal land on the bare branch of the oak tree I had climbed as a child. Nothing I cannot handle. But I need to be here a little longer than planned. Take the time you need, he said, surprising me with his understanding. The Richardson account will still be there when you get back. Family comes first. Family comes first. The phrase echoed in my mind as I ended the call. If only my parents believed that too. When I returned to the kitchen, Harold was showing Jason something on his phone, both of them nodding with serious expressions. What did I miss? I asked. Harold looked up, determination etched in every line of his face. We were just discussing step 1 of our plan. It is time to secure the valuables before we create our little scenario. As we discussed the details, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Whatever happened next would either heal my family or reveal wounds too deep to ever properly mend. Either way, I was about to discover exactly where I stood in the family I had spent a lifetime trying to please. The next morning dawned clear and cold, sunlight glinting off the snow-covered lawn like scattered diamonds. I had slept fitfully, dreams filled with confrontations and reconciliations that left me exhausted. When I finally made my way downstairs, Harold was already dressed in what Jason jokingly called his lawyer suit, a charcoal gray ensemble that made him look official and slightly intimidating. "First day of Operation Reality Check," he announced, placing a fresh mug of coffee in front of me. "Are you ready?" I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. "As ready as I will ever be." Jason bounded down the stairs moments later, energy radiating from him in a way I had not seen since arriving. "I rented the storage unit," he said proudly. "Paid cash like you said, Grandpa." Harold nodded approvingly. "Good work. Now, before we start moving anything, we need to document the current state of the house. Abigail, can you take photos of each room? We want before and after evidence." As I moved through the house with my phone, capturing images of each space, I noticed things I had overlooked in the emotional haze of my arrival. The living room furniture looked newer than I remembered, an expensive leather sectional replacing the comfortable old sofa where I had spent countless hours reading. The large flat-screen television mounted on the wall was definitely new, as was the sound system beneath it. In my parents' bedroom, I discovered a closet full of designer clothes with tags still attached. My mother's jewelry box contained several pieces I had never seen before. On my father's nightstand sat a receipt for a golf club membership with an eye-watering annual fee. Financial troubles? It seemed my parents had been lying about more than just their sudden vacation. "Find anything interesting?" Harold asked when I returned to the kitchen. I showed him the photos of my discoveries. They told Jason money was tight, but they have been spending like crazy. Harold's face darkened. "Robert always did have expensive tastes. And your mother never could resist keeping up with her friends. The country club membership alone costs more than my annual student loan payments," I said, the betrayal cutting deeper with each revelation. "They maxed out 3 credit cards." Jason added quietly. "I found the statements in Dad's desk last month when I was looking for stamps. They are drowning in debt, but they keep spending." This added a new dimension to their theft of my money. Not just selfishness, but desperation disguised as entitlement. "All the more reason to secure the valuables," Harold said firmly. "Not just for our plan, but to protect them from potential creditors." We spent the morning carefully selecting items to transfer to the storage unit. Harold focused on family heirlooms and documents, while I found myself drawn to the albums and mementos of my childhood. Among them was a photo album I had never seen before, filled with pictures of me at various events, many of which my parents had missed. Recitals, competitions, award ceremonies, all documented by someone else's hand. "I took those," Harold said softly, noticing me lingering over the album. "I knew someone should be there to capture those moments for you." Tears pricked my eyes as I carefully placed the album in the box marked Abigail's Memories. "You were there? For all of these?" Harold nodded. "As many as I could manage. Sometimes your parents would tell me about events at the last minute, or I would hear about them from your teachers when I picked you up from school." "Why did you never say anything?" I asked, a lump forming in my throat. "I did not want to deepen the hurt," he replied simply. "And I hoped they would change, realize what they were missing." Jason appeared in the doorway, holding a baseball trophy. "They missed my championship game last spring," he said. "Told me they had to work late. I saw them at the restaurant downtown when I was riding home with my coach." The shared pain in his eyes mirrored my own, creating a bond forged from the same wounds. We worked in companionable silence after that, filling the SUV Harold had rented with boxes of memories and valuables. At the storage facility, we organized everything carefully, Harold making meticulous notes of what we had removed. "Not just for the plan," he explained, "but so nothing truly important gets lost in the shuffle." Back at the house, we began phase 2, creating the scenario that would trigger our parents' panic. Harold directed us with the precision of a film director, indicating which areas should look disturbed without actually damaging anything. "The key," he explained, "is to make it look concerning enough to create immediate alarm, but not so extreme that they call the police right away. We want them to call us first." We moved furniture slightly out of place, left cabinets open, scattered papers across the floor of my father's office. In the master bedroom, we pulled clothes from the closet and left them in disarray, careful not to damage anything valuable. "Now for the piece de resistance," Harold said, leading us to Jason's room. This is where we create the impression that something happened to Jason. We made Jason's bed look hastily abandoned, a chair overturned. His phone charger left plugged in, but the phone conspicuously absent. A half-finished glass of water on the nightstand, a single shoe left behind. "Perfect," Harold declared, surveying our work. Not too obvious, but disturbing enough to raise immediate concerns. The final touch was the back door, which we left slightly ajar, the deadbolts seemingly forced. Harold had carefully created the appearance of tampering without actually damaging the lock. "Now," he said, checking his watch, "we need to establish our alibi and witness. Eleanor across the street has agreed to tell your parents she noticed unusual activity at the house yesterday, but assumed it was related to your arrival. She owes me a favor after I helped with her property tax appeal last year." My eyebrows shot up. "You got the neighbors involved?" "Just Eleanor," Harold assured me. "And she does not know the full plan. Only that we are teaching your parents a lesson about responsibility." She was quite supportive, actually. "Said your mother has become insufferable at neighborhood association meetings." With the scene set, we packed overnight bags and locked up the house, leaving a single light on in the kitchen as if hastily abandoned. As we drove away, I felt a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. "Phase 3 begins tomorrow," Harold said as we headed toward the small apartment I had rented in town as our temporary headquarters. "When your parents return to find their carefully ordered world disrupted, just as they disrupted ours." Jason, sitting in the back seat, leaned forward. "Do you think they will really care? About me disappearing, I mean?" The vulnerability in his question broke my heart. "They will care, Jason. Despite everything, they do love you. They have just forgotten how to show it properly." Whether I believed those words myself, I could not entirely say. But as we settled into the small apartment that would be our base of operations, I found myself hoping that our plan would not just teach them a lesson, but somehow help repair what was broken in our family. Harold made the call that evening, his voice masterfully concerned as he spoke to my father. "Robert, I just stopped by the house to check on things, and something is not right. The back door looks forced, things are disturbed inside, and I cannot find Jason anywhere. Have you heard from him?" "No? I am very worried. When will you be back? Tomorrow evening? I think you should come sooner." "Yes, very concerning. I will keep trying his phone." As he ended the call, Harold gave us a thumbs up. "They are rebooking their flights now. We'll be home by tomorrow afternoon instead of evening." "And now we wait," I said, the countdown to confrontation officially begun. The apartment I had rented was small but comfortable, a one-bedroom unit in a converted Victorian house, not far from the town center. Jason took the pull-out sofa while Harold and I alternated between the bedroom and a recliner that had seen better days. Despite the cramped quarters, there was something comforting about our improvised sanctuary, a solidarity that had been missing from our family dynamic for as long as I could remember. That first morning of waiting, Jason and I sat at the tiny kitchen table while Harold made a grocery run. An awkward silence stretched between us. Years of separation and different experiences creating a chasm neither of us quite knew how to bridge. So, I finally ventured, "How is school going?" Jason rolled his eyes, but there was a hint of a smile. "Really, Abby? The school question? I am not 10 anymore." I laughed, acknowledging the lameness of my opener. "Fair enough. What would you rather talk about?" He considered this, absent-mindedly spinning his phone on the table. "Why did you really come home for Christmas? You must have known what they are like by now." The directness of his question caught me off guard. I guess I kept hoping things would be different. That maybe this time, with enough planning and money and effort on my part, we could have the kind of Christmas I always wanted as a kid. "The perfect family holiday," Jason said, not mockingly but with understanding. "With home-cooked meals and presents under a tree and everyone actually being nice to each other." "Something like that," I admitted. "Stupid, right?" "Not stupid," he said quietly. "Just unlikely with Robert and Sandra as parents." It struck me then how he referred to our parents by their first names, creating a distance that spoke volumes about their relationship. When did they become Robert and Sandra to you instead of Mom and Dad? Jason shrugged, but the casualness seemed forced. About a year ago. When they started treating me more like a roommate they tolerated than a son. Always busy, always distracted, always somewhere else even when they were physically present. I am sorry, I said, meaning it deeply. I should have been more aware of what was happening here. How could you be? Every time you called, they put on the perfect parent act. And it is not like I was going to complain about them during our 5-minute conversations. The realization of how effectively I had been kept in the dark made me angry all over again. Tell me about it now, I urged. What has really been going on? Over the next hour, Jason opened up about the past 2 years since I had last visited home. How our father had grown increasingly obsessed with appearances, joining the country club despite their financial strain, buying a new car they couldn't afford. How our mother had started a lifestyle brand Instagram account that consumed her attention, staging perfect family moments for social media while ignoring the actual family in front of her. Last Thanksgiving, Jason recounted, she spent 3 hours arranging the table for photos, then ordered takeout because she didn't have time to actually cook. Dad was on his phone the entire meal, and they both left right after to attend some networking event. I ate pie in my room while watching Netflix. Each story strengthened my resolve that our plan wasn't just justified, it was necessary. These weren't the parents I remembered from my early childhood, imperfect but present. They had become caricatures of success without substance. What about you? Jason asked eventually. Is New York everything you hoped it would be? I considered the question, thinking about my tiny apartment, the long hours at the marketing firm, the friendships that sustained me. It is hard sometimes. Expensive, competitive, but also exciting and full of possibilities. I have built something there that feels like mine, you know. Jason nodded. That is why I want to go to NYU next year. To build something that belongs to me, away from all this. NYU? That is amazing, Jason. Have you applied? Pride flashed across his face. Got my acceptance last week. But I haven't told them yet. Dad keeps pushing for state where he has connections. Your life isn't about his connections, I said firmly. It is about what you want. Try telling him that, Jason muttered. Harold returned then, arms laden with grocery bags. Who wants Christmas pizza? He announced. Since we are rewriting holiday traditions anyway, I thought we might as well enjoy ourselves. That evening, as we ate pizza and watched old Christmas movies on my laptop, I felt a bittersweet contentment. This wasn't the family holiday I had envisioned, but there was an authenticity to it that had been missing from our carefully orchestrated family gatherings for years. My phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the evening, texts and missed calls from both parents increasing in urgency. Where are you? We just got home. The house looks disturbed. Call us immediately. We are worried about Jason. Harold said you were supposed to be watching Jason. What happened? Call now. Harold noticed me checking the messages. They're panicking. He observed with satisfaction. Good. Let them feel what it is like to be suddenly abandoned, to have plans disrupted, to be left without explanation. Should I answer? I asked, uncertain. Not yet, Harold advised. Let the lesson sink in a little deeper first. Remember how long you waited at that bus station when they forgot to pick you up after your first year of college? For hours in the rain because they had decided last minute to attend a neighbor's barbecue. The memory stung, as fresh as if it had happened yesterday instead of 7 years ago. I had called repeatedly, each time receiving promises they were just leaving now, only to eventually take a taxi I couldn't afford to an empty house. I remember, I said quietly. Then let them wait a little longer, Harold said, his voice gentle despite the firmness of his words. Some lessons need time to be properly learned. That night, I dreamed of earlier Christmases. Of a time when my mother had still baked cookies and my father had lifted me to place the star atop the tree. Had those moments been real? Or had I constructed them from fragments of movies and wishful thinking? The line between memory and longing had blurred over the years of disappointment. I woke early, unsettled by the dreams and the knowledge that today would bring the confrontation we had planned. Harold was already awake, making coffee in the tiny kitchenette. Having second thoughts? He asked, observing my expression. Maybe, I admitted. What if this just makes everything worse? Harold handed me a steaming mug. The relationship you have with your parents is already broken, Abigail. This may shock them enough to recognize that fact, or it may simply confirm what you already know but have been unwilling to accept. Either way, the truth will set you free, even if it hurts at first. When did you get so wise? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. Harold smiled. Around the time my hair turned white. Wisdom is the consolation prize for aging. By midday, the messages from my parents had reached a fever pitch. My father's texts had turned from concern to angry, demanding explanations and making threats about calling the police. My mother's alternated between guilt-inducing worry and attempts to bribe information out of me with promises to make everything right. It is time, Harold finally said, checking his watch. They have had 24 hours of uncertainty. Now we deliver the final phase of our lesson. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. Okay, I will text them our address. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, hesitating before typing a simple message. We are safe. Come to this address if you want answers. I added the apartment location and pressed send before I could change my mind. Now we wait, Jason said, nervously pacing the small living area. Do you think they will come right away? Knowing your father's driving when he is angry? Harold said dryly. I would expect them within 15 minutes. He was right. Exactly 12 minutes later. The sound of tires screeching in the parking lot announced their arrival. Jason peeked through the blinds. They are here, he confirmed, his voice cracking slightly. Dad looks like his head might explode. I stood, smoothing down my sweater in a futile attempt to calm my racing heart. Remember the plan, I said, more to myself than to them. Stay calm. Stick to the facts, make them understand the consequences of their actions. Harold placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. You can do this, Abigail. Stand your ground. Heavy footsteps pounded up the exterior stairs, followed by aggressive knocking that was more like pounding. Abigail, open this door right now. My father's voice, tight with anger. I took one more deep breath, nodded to Harold and Jason, and moved to open the door to the confrontation we had carefully orchestrated. The moment of truth had arrived. When I opened the door, the first thing I noticed was how haggard my parents looked. My father Robert's usually meticulously styled hair was disheveled, and my mother Sandra's makeup could not hide the dark circles under her eyes. Their tanned faces from the Hawaiian sun created an odd contrast with their expressions of distress. What the hell is going on? Robert demanded, pushing past me into the apartment. His eyes widened when he saw Jason sitting calmly on the sofa. Jason? You're okay? What is the meaning of this? Sandra rushed to Jason, attempting to pull him into an embrace that he smoothly sidestepped. We have been worried sick. The house looked like it had been broken into. Why would you do this to us? I closed the door quietly behind them. Why would we do this to you? I repeated, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. That is an interesting question, Mom. Almost as interesting as why you would steal my money and abandon your son during Christmas. Robert turned to me, his face flushing deeper. This was some kind of sick prank? Do you have any idea what we have been through in the last 24 hours? About as much as I went through when I arrived to a dark house and a note telling me you had taken my Christmas money for yourselves, I replied evenly. About as much as Jason went through waking up to find his parents had abandoned him for a luxury vacation. We did not abandon him, Sandra protested, looking frantically between us. We left him with Harold, and we knew you were coming. Without asking either of us, Harold interjected, speaking for the first time since my parents' arrival. Without so much as a conversation about whether we were available or willing to take on that responsibility. Robert jabbed a finger toward Harold. You. I should have known you would be behind this. Always interfering in how we raise our children. Someone needed to, Harold replied calmly, unintimidated. Someone needed to show them what actual support looks like. Sandra sank onto the edge of an armchair, her designer purse clutched to her chest like a shield. I do not understand why you would put us through this terror just to make some point. We have been imagining the worst possible scenarios. Now you know how it feels, Jason said, speaking up for the first time. To be left without explanation. To have your trust violated. To be treated like an afterthought. This is ridiculous, Robert scoffed, though I could see uncertainty creeping into his expression. We left you a note, Jason. We did not just disappear. A note. I repeated incredulously. A note saying you had taken $3,000 of my money without asking. Money I had specifically sent for our family Christmas. We were going to pay you back. Sandra said quickly, her voice taking on the placating tone she had always used when trying to smooth over problems. And we will have Christmas when we return. Just a little delayed. It is not about the timing, I said, feeling years of suppressed frustration rising to the surface. It is about the pattern. The constant taking without asking. The broken promises. The way you consistently put your own desires above everyone else's needs. That is not fair, Robert protested, though with less conviction than before. We have given you both everything. Education, opportunities, a good home. A home you are rarely present in, Jason countered. Parents who are physically here but mentally absent. Do you even know what classes I am taking this year? Dad? Or what colleges I have applied to? Robert's momentary silence was damning. You haven't been giving, I continued, building on Jason's momentum. You have been performing the role of parents while actually serving only yourselves. And, when convenient, you have used me as your personal ATM without even the courtesy of asking first. Sandra's eyes filled with tears, but I had seen this tactical crying too many times to be swayed by it. We love you both, she insisted. Maybe we have made mistakes. But staging this elaborate scheme was cruel. Was it as cruel as leaving your 17-year-old son alone during the holidays? As cruel as stealing money your daughter worked overtime to save? Harold asked mildly. Or perhaps as cruel as consistently placing your children last on your list of priorities while expecting them to place you first on theirs. You have no right to judge our parenting, Robert snapped at Harold. You raised one daughter who barely speaks to you. The low blow hung in the air for a moment before Harold responded with dignity. My relationship with your mother is complicated, Robert, but at least I acknowledge my failings. When have you ever admitted yours? Something in Harold's steady gaze seemed to penetrate Robert's anger. He ran a hand through his hair. A gesture I recognized from childhood as a sign of his internal struggle. This is insane, he muttered, but the fire had dimmed in his voice. Staging a fake break-in. Making us believe something terrible had happened. Something terrible did happen, I said quietly. You betrayed the trust of both your children. Again. And this time. We decided to show you exactly how that feels. Sandra looked up, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. By making us think Jason was missing? By putting us through 24 hours of hell? By giving you a taste of your own medicine, Jason corrected. A small sample of what it feels like to be on the receiving end of your thoughtlessness. I moved to the small dining table where we had laid out the evidence we had gathered, credit card statements showing their mounting debt, receipts for luxury purchases made within days of claiming financial hardship, and most damning of all, the bank transfer receipt showing my money being moved directly to the travel agency that had booked their Hawaiian vacation. We found these while staging the break-in, I explained, spreading the papers before them. Care to explain how you can afford a country club membership but needed to steal my Christmas fund? Robert's face paled as he recognized the documents. You had no right to go through our personal papers. And you had no right to go through my bank account, I countered. Yet here we are. Sandra reached tentatively for the transfer receipt, her hand trembling slightly. We were going to surprise you both with a family vacation next summer, she attempted weakly. This was just borrowing in advance. Without asking. Jason pointed out. Without even telling us. Just taking and assuming we would be okay with it because we always have been before. And leaving me to explain to my brother why there would be no Christmas celebration after I flew 2,000 miles to be here, I added. Expecting me to clean up your mess, as usual. Robert looked at the documents, then at his son's resolute face, then finally at me. For the first time, I saw something crack in his carefully maintained facade. I never thought of it that way. He admitted quietly. We needed a break. Things have been stressful with work, with the bills. Bills you created by living beyond your means, Harold noted, while expecting Abigail to subsidize your lifestyle and Jason to accept your absences without complaint. Sandra dabbed at her eyes with a tissue Jason reluctantly handed her. We never meant to hurt either of you, she said. We just got caught up in appearances, in trying to keep up with everyone else. It spiraled. And you never once considered how your choices affected us, Jason said. How it felt to be the kid whose parents are too busy with their own lives to show up for his games. How embarrassing it is to hear your friends talk about family dinners when you eat alone most nights. Or how it felt for me to save for months, working overtime and skipping lunches, to send money home for a special Christmas, only to find it spent on yourselves, I added. Did you ever once consider how that would make me feel? The silence that followed was answer enough. Robert sank heavily onto the sofa, suddenly looking older than his 55 years. We really messed up, didn't we? It wasn't a revelation. It wasn't even a full apology. But it was perhaps the first genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing I had ever heard from my father. Yes, I said simply. You did. And not just this once. Sandra moved to sit beside Robert, her usual poise completely abandoned. What happens now? She asked, looking between us uncertainly. How do we fix this? I exchanged glances with Jason and Harold, drawing strength from their supportive presence. That, I said firmly, depends on whether you are truly ready to change. For several long moments, no one spoke. The ticking of the wall clock seemed unnaturally loud in the small apartment, marking the seconds of this pivotal moment in our family history. Outside, snow had begun to fall again. Soft flakes visible through the window, creating a strangely peaceful backdrop to our emotional confrontation. Finally, I broke the silence. We need to establish some boundaries, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Real, enforceable boundaries that will be respected moving forward. Robert looked like he wanted to object, his instinctive need to maintain control visibly warring with the realization of how precarious his position had become. Sandra simply nodded, seeming almost relieved that someone else was taking charge. What kind of boundaries? She asked cautiously. First, I said, financial ones. You will repay the $3,000 you took from me, with interest, within 6 months. And there will be no more borrowing from either of us without explicit permission and a written agreement about repayment terms. Jason leaned forward. And I want privacy and respect. No more volunteering me for things without asking. No more entering my room without knocking. No more checking my phone or computer. You are still a minor, Robert began. But Harold cleared his throat. He is 17, Robert. In less than a year, he will be legally able to walk away from this family entirely. Is that what you want? Because that is where this path leads. The blunt assessment seemed to land with impact. Robert's objection died on his lips, replaced by a troubled frown. And most importantly, I continued, we need honesty. No more pretending everything is fine when it is not. No more hiding financial problems while maintaining appearances. No more promises you do not intend to keep. Sandra twisted her hands in her lap. We never meant for things to get this bad, she said softly. It just happened gradually. A little debt here, a missed event there. And then suddenly you are stealing from your daughter and abandoning your son at Christmas, Harold finished for her. Choices have consequences, Sandra. Even the small ones over time. What about the house? Robert asked abruptly. You made it look like there was a break-in. The neighbors might have noticed. Only Eleanor knows anything, Harold assured him. And she has agreed to keep our confidence. As for the house, everything of actual value is safely stored. We can return it all today. I pulled a notepad from my bag, one I had prepared the previous evening with Jason's help. I have drafted what I am calling a family agreement, I explained, sliding it across the coffee table. It outlines the boundaries we have discussed and adds a few more specific terms. Robert picked it up skeptically, scanning the pages with narrowed eyes. This reads like a legal contract. Because it essentially is one, I confirmed. Harold helped with the language. It includes the repayment schedule for my money, guidelines for how we communicate with each other going forward, and expectations for behavior on all sides. All sides. Sandra questioned. So you have obligations too? Of course, I nodded. I commit to regular communication, to being clear about my own boundaries and needs rather than expecting you to guess them, and to working toward rebuilding trust rather than holding past mistakes against you indefinitely. Provided, of course, that those mistakes stop repeating. Jason had his own copy, which he handed to our mother. I added my own section, he explained. About college. Sandra's eyes widened as she read. NYU? But that is so expensive and so far away. I got a scholarship, Jason said, a hint of pride in his voice. And student loans will cover the rest. I do not need your money, just your support. But your father always hoped you would follow his path, she protested weakly. My path is my own, Jason said firmly. Just like Abby made hers. The agreement asks that you respect that and celebrate my choices rather than trying to redirect them toward your preferences. Robert was still reading, his frown deepening with each page. And if we refuse to sign this? I had anticipated this question. Then we each make our own decisions about what kind of relationship we want moving forward. Jason has already discussed the possibility of finishing his senior year living with me in New York. You would take him away from us? Sandra gasped. No, I corrected gently. He would choose to leave an environment where he does not feel respected or valued. Just as I might choose to limit my visits and financial support if nothing changes. These are not threats, Mom. They are natural consequences. Harold, who had been watching the exchange carefully, added, no one wants to sever family ties. This document is an attempt to heal them, not cut them. But healing requires acknowledgement of the wound first. Robert set the agreement down, his expression unreadable. I need time to think about this. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Glancing at the screen, I saw it was Lawrence from work. Excuse me, I need to take this, I said, stepping into the bedroom and closing the door. Abigail, Lawrence's voice came through clearly. How is the extended family visit going? Complicated, I admitted, but potentially productive. What is up? I wanted to let you know before the official announcement next week. The creative director position? It is yours if you want it. The board approved your promotion yesterday. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, stunned. The position I had been working toward for 2 years, with its substantial salary increase and creative control, was finally within reach. That is, wow, Lawrence. Thank you. I definitely want it. Excellent. We will discuss details when you return. Enjoy the rest of your family time, and congratulations. I ended the call and took a moment to compose myself before returning to the living room, where an uneasy silence had fallen in my absence. Good news? Harold asked, noting my expression. Very good news, I confirmed. I just got the promotion I have been working toward. Creative director position with a 40% salary increase. Congratulations, sweetheart. Sandra said automatically, then seemed to catch herself. I mean that sincerely. We know how hard you have worked. Do you? I couldn't help asking. Because until yesterday, you seemed to think my money was freely available for your use, as if my work and sacrifices meant nothing. Robert had the grace to look ashamed. We have taken you for granted, he admitted, the words seeming to physically pain him. Both of you. And it took this for us to see it. So what now? Jason asked, the hopeful note in his voice reminding me how young he still was. Despite his mature handling of the situation, Robert looked at Sandra, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then, to my surprise, he reached for the agreement and a pen. We sign, he said simply. And we try to do better. Sandra hesitated only briefly before nodding. We sign. And we start rebuilding what we have damaged. As they both signed their names to the document, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief, vindication, cautious hope, and underneath it all, a lingering sadness for what our family could have been all along if these boundaries had existed years ago. There is one more thing, I said as they set down their pens. Jason is welcome to stay with me in New York for the remainder of his winter break if he wants. I have an extra room in my apartment, and it might give everyone some space to process. Jason looked up, surprise and excitement crossing his face. Really? You would be okay with that? More than okay, I assured him. In fact, I would love the company. Sandra opened her mouth as if to object, then visibly stopped herself, consulting the newly signed agreement. That would be Jason's choice to make, she said carefully. According to what we just agreed to. It was a small step, but a significant one. For perhaps the first time, our mother was acknowledging her son's autonomy instead of imposing her preferences. I want to go, Jason said firmly. I want to see New York and spend time with Abby. Robert nodded stiffly. Then we will respect that decision. The words seemed to cost him, but he got them out. Harold clapped his hands together once, breaking the tension. Well then, I believe we have a house to put back in order and some storage items to retrieve. Shall we? As we prepared to leave the apartment, I pulled Harold aside. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. For being the adult in our lives when they could not be. He squeezed my hand gently. Family is not just about blood, Abigail. It is about who shows up. Who stays. Who puts in the work. I am just glad you and Jason are learning that lesson earlier than I did. Looking at my parents waiting awkwardly by the door, I knew the road ahead would not be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time and consistent effort to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of genuine hope that our family might eventually become something healthier than it had ever been before. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable Christmas gift of all. 6 months later, I stood by the window of my office in Manhattan, watching the early summer sun cast golden light across the city's skyline. The view from the creative director's office was significantly better than from my previous cubicle, just one of many upgrades that had come with the promotion. On my desk sat a framed photograph. New and still slightly unfamiliar. It showed the four of us, Harold, Jason, and my parents, taken during a weekend visit last month. Not a perfect family portrait by any means. The smiles still contained traces of the tension we were working through, but genuine enough to warrant framing. My phone buzzed with a notification, a transfer alert from my banking app. $3,000 plus interest, the final payment from my parents. They had stuck to the repayment schedule without a single reminder needed. One of several promising signs that the changes we had demanded might actually be lasting. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Come in, I called, turning from the window. Jason entered. His lanky frame filling the doorway in a way that still surprised me. In the months since he had moved in with me to finish his senior year remotely, he had grown another inch and gained a confidence that transformed him from boy to young man. Ready for lunch? He asked, dropping his backpack by the door. He had been exploring the city while I worked, preparing for his freshman year at NYU, which would begin in just 2 months. Definitely, I replied, grabbing my purse. How was the campus tour? Amazing, he grinned, his enthusiasm infectious. The film department has equipment I have only dreamed about. And I met some other incoming freshmen who seem really cool. As we made our way down to the street level, my phone rang. Harold's name flashed on the screen. Hey, Grandpa, I answered, putting him on speaker so Jason could hear. How is the Sunshine State treating you? Harold had finally taken the retirement trip to Florida he had been postponing for years, a 3-month exploration of the coast in a rented convertible. Cannot complain about the weather, though the humidity takes some getting used to, he replied, his voice warm through the speaker. How are my favorite grandchildren? We are your only grandchildren, Jason laughed, a running joke between them. Details, Harold dismissed cheerfully. I wanted to check if we are still on for our video call with your parents tonight. They mentioned Robert has some news he wants to share. As far as I know, I confirmed. 7 o'clock our time. Right? Correct. And Abigail, his tone shifted slightly, more serious. I am proud of how you have handled everything. Setting boundaries without cutting ties is not easy. But you have managed it with grace. I felt a flush of pleasure at his approval. I had a good teacher. After ending the call, Jason and I found a small cafe near my office building, claiming a table outside to enjoy the perfect June weather. As we waited for our orders, I studied my brother's face, noting how the perpetual worry that had once lined his forehead had smoothed away. Do you ever regret it? He asked suddenly. The whole confrontation thing at Christmas? Pushing for the agreement. I considered his question carefully. No, I finally said. It was painful. And sometimes I still feel guilty about how we scared them. But look at the results. Dad is in therapy now, something he swore he would never do. Mom has scaled back her social media obsession and is actually present during conversations. And they are working on their financial issues instead of hiding them. And we talk, Jason added. Actually talk about real things, not just surface stuff. Dad called me yesterday just to ask about the campus tour. Not to give advice or tell me what to do, just to listen. Exactly, I nodded. The agreement was just a starting point. The real change has been in how we all communicate now. Our food arrived, and we ate in companionable silence for a few minutes. The bustle of New York continued around us, a city that never paused, but somehow made space for quiet moments of reflection. I got an email from Mom this morning, Jason said eventually. She asked if I wanted my room painted before I come home for the August visit. Said I could pick any color I wanted. That is new, I observed. She usually insists on keeping everything neutral for resale value. Right? And she said even though I will be at college, she wants me to know I will always have a space that feels like mine when I visit. He shook his head in wonder. 6 months ago, she was redecorating my room into a home office before I had even graduated. These small shifts, more than the grand gestures or formal agreements, were what gave me hope for our family's future. The consistent effort to consider others, to respect boundaries, to communicate honestly, even when it was uncomfortable. That evening, we gathered around my laptop for our weekly family video call. Harold joining from his beachfront rental, my parents from their kitchen table, Jason and I from my living room sofa. The initial awkwardness of these calls had gradually given way to a cautious, but genuine warmth. So, my father began after the usual pleasantries. I wanted to share some news with everyone. He took a visible breath, my mother reaching to squeeze his hand encouragingly. I have accepted a different position at the firm. Less prestige, fewer hours, slightly lower salary. But much better work-life balance. This was significant coming from a man who had defined himself by his career advancement for as long as I could remember. That sounds like a positive change, Dad, I said, using the parental title that had begun to feel natural again in recent months. What prompted the decision? Several things, he admitted. The therapy sessions, for one. Realizing what I had sacrificed for the corner office. And wanting to be more present for whatever time we have left as a family unit before Jason fully launches into his adult life. My mother smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. We are also downsizing the house, she added. Moving to a smaller place closer to town. Less to maintain, less to show off. More to actually enjoy. The conversation continued, touching on Harold's travels, my latest work project, Jason's university preparations. Not perfect. Still with occasional moments of tension when old patterns threatened to reemerge. But so vastly improved from the dysfunction of 6 months ago that it sometimes felt like we were an entirely different family. After the call ended, Jason went to his room to work on a summer film project, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I opened my laptop and found myself looking at flights home for Thanksgiving. Something I would have approached with dread in previous years, but now considered with cautious optimism. The most profound lesson I had learned through our family crisis was not about revenge or even justice. It was about the courage to disrupt harmful patterns. To demand better treatment not just for myself, but for those I loved. To understand that sometimes the most caring action is not smooth compliance, but firm resistance. Setting boundaries had not destroyed our family as I had once feared it might. Instead, it had created the foundation for a healthier one to emerge from the ruins of what had been broken for so long. My phone buzzed with a text message from my mother. Just found these while packing. Thought you might want them. Attached was a photo of a box filled with my childhood art projects and writings. Things I had assumed were discarded years ago. I smiled, typing back, I would love them. Thank you for saving them all this time. Her response came quickly. I always saved everything. Just was not always good at showing what mattered to me. Working on that now. Small steps. Imperfect progress, but movement in the right direction. That night, as I prepared for bed, I thought about the upcoming holiday seasons, opportunities to create new traditions based on mutual respect rather than obligation or performance. The family we were slowly becoming might never match the idealized version I had longed for as a child, but it was becoming something perhaps more valuable, authentic, with acknowledged flaws and genuine efforts to overcome them. The note I had found on the refrigerator that snowy December night had marked the end of one chapter in our family story and the difficult beginning of another. And while the path forward would undoubtedly contain its own challenges and setbacks, I was no longer walking it alone, pretending everything was fine when it was not. Truth, even painful truth, had set us all free to build something better. So what about you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members to protect yourself? Or have you experienced a moment when a family crisis ultimately led to positive change? Remember to like, subscribe, and share your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do is know we are not alone in these family struggles. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, creating healthy relationships often begins with the courage to say enough when necessary. Until next time, this is Abigail, wishing you the strength to stand your ground and the wisdom to know when bridges need building rather than burning.